Hi, I'm Kirkpatrick, Cloud Architect here at Advizex, and today we're going to be talking about an introduction to GitOps. So when we think about GitOps, it really goes hand in hand with the concepts of infrastructure as code. So over here, I'm going to start filling in some of these boxes when we start talking about infrastructure as code. When we talk about that, you're going to have things like Terraform, you're going to have things like Ansible, right, where you're codifying a lot of your infrastructure or scripts that you're using in your environment. When it comes to Kubernetes, you're also going to have things like YAML as part of your Kubernetes manifest, various configurations that you're deploying on Kubernetes. And then, of course, you're going to have things like your app code, right? Now, all of these things have to be stored somewhere. Commonly, which has been a practice for a long time, and developers have been using this for, many, many years, is to put that in some type of version control repository, right? So you have your configuration, you have your code, and you have to store that somewhere. And that's going to be in some type of version control, and we're going to use Git in this example, hence GitOps, right? So you're going to store all this stuff, and commonly, you're at least going to start off and see a branching structure that's somewhat monolithic, right? To where you have a main branch, and you're going to have one or maybe more developers or operators storing that code in one branch, making changes to it. And some of those characteristics, again, and benefits really, are that code is stored centrally, right? So your code is available, you're moving off of a local system, you're able to start kind of collaborating on that. You have, naturally, it's versioned, so you're able to track those versions of that code as you work with it, as you make changes to it. However, a lot of the work that you're doing is still manual in nature. So you're making those changes, you're using the CLI, maybe you have a GUI interface for your Git repository, but you're making those changes, you're pulling the changes down, you're making additional changes, you're pushing those back up. It's still kind of a very kind of highly manual process. And on that, there's no or very little automation involved throughout that whole process, right? Throughout that whole code lifecycle. So a lot of these things are what we kind of traditionally consider, I'm going to caption all this stuff, infrastructure as code. Or I'm also just going to say X as code, right? Because maybe it's not only infrastructure, it's application code, it's whatever you're trying to codify. So infrastructure as code / X as code. A lot of these things are things that you might be doing today, and the question is, well, how does that relate to GitOps? How do we make that transition? So one of the big things that we start talking about is CI/CD, right? So continuous integration and continuous delivery. And we start introducing these concepts, and there's a lot of different platforms out there. I'm just going to name a few. Maybe that's Jenkins, or maybe that's Azure DevOps. Again, there's a lot of them, but you're going to have a CI/CD platform that starts to play a role in this kind of whole solution and operating model. As you move towards CI/CD, you're going to move more towards collaboration, right? So you have bigger teams. You start thinking about, an enterprise. How do we take some of the things manual, no automation? What can we do? How can we use these systems and apply that to a lot of the concepts that go along with managing and deploying infrastructure? And one thing is your branching structures are typically, they're going to start to look a little bit different, right? So, and I'm summarizing here, but you're going to have your main branch similar to that you had before, but then you're going to start having other branches. It might be a dev branch, it might be a different feature branch, and those changes are going to be made they're going to be pulled down into these other branches. Changes are going to be made. They're going to be pushed or merged back up into your other main branch, or your main branch. And that's going to be more of a life cycle that promotes collaboration and allows many people to be working on a single individual project. So now that we've kind of talked about how the branching might be different, let's talk a little bit about some of the other characteristics that you're going to see with CI/CD, right? So as part of that, the continuous integration and continuous delivery, the mechanism that kind of supports that is what we're going to call pipeline, right? So again, not necessarily something new, something that's pretty commonly used specifically on modern application development, but when it relates to infrastructure, this is when we kind of get into some of these new concepts and how they apply. So from a pipeline perspective, this is where you're going to have your CI/CD pipeline executing a lot of that automation that is going to kind of start to pull a lot of this stuff together, right? So you're going to see a syncing that occurs between your Git repositories and these CI/CD systems where you have your pipelines configured. And those changes to your infrastructure are going to be continuously reconciled, right? So this is really what one of the big things when it comes to GitOps. You have your infrastructure as code, you have things defined, but what happens on day two, right? So what happens when you need to go add something to your infrastructure? You need to modify your infrastructure. How does that play into the whole application? How are you handling those day two type changes? And CI/CD, it really plays a key role in enabling that. You need something that's going to take a look at your configuration that's very declarative. You've stated what you want your infrastructure to look like. When it makes a change, the CI/CD system is really what is the heart and soul of managing that environment. It becomes more of a living system versus static declared configuration stored in a Git repository. And this is really what bridges the gap and what we consider GitOps. You're leveraging a CI/CD system. It's highly automated. You have a pipeline where those changes are synced and pulled from your Git repositories, and they are applied and deployed to the desired state, right? And that's really, another way to think of that is comparing your current state with your desired state and having a system automatically apply those changes. So hopefully this was really informative. This kind of wraps up our intro to GitOps. Obviously, there's a lot more topics and a lot more expanded discussion that we can have. If you're looking to learn more, check out other videos in this video series, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.